Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at India's economy. It really feels like this incredible balancing act, dynamic growth on one side, but also some really persistent challenges.
Absolutely.
And I think beyond those big headlines, what are the maybe less talked about things, the sort of undercurrents shaping India's economic future right now? That's what I'm curious about.
That's a great way to put it. And yeah, our mission today is exactly that. Let's try to unpack the key drivers and also the key challenges for the Indian economy, say 2024, 2025. We're pulling from some really good analysis, and it definitely shows, like you said, resilience, remarkable resilience even, but also, yeah, some critical vulnerabilities we need to talk about.
Okay. And for you listening in, think of this deep dive as your shortcut. We want to help you really get the nuances of this economic powerhouse, get the full picture, hopefully without getting buried in data.
Yeah, let's try and cut through the noise.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. India's economy, it's kept up its post-pandemic recovery, right? We hear about consumption, digital adoption is huge, resilient services. But there's always a catch, isn't there? What is it here?
Uh-huh. There usually is. The catch here, primarily, is that rural demand hasn't quite kept pace. It's still pretty uneven.
Okay, why is that?
Well, it boils down largely to inflation. Those ongoing pressures, especially on essentials like food and fuel, they really hit purchasing power in rural areas hard.
Right.
So the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, they're doing this delicate dance, trying to use interest rates cautiously, cool down inflation.
Make borrowing pricier.
Exactly. But at the same time, they need to make sure there's enough liquidity, enough fuel in the engine, basically, so growth doesn't stall completely.
It's a tough balance. Okay, so that's the rural challenge. But then you have this almost counter narrative, this incredibly vibrant story in India's digital and tech sectors. It feels like a different world sometimes. What's
Yeah.
driving that?
Yeah, it really does. And what's fascinating, I think, is how India's digital infrastructure, it's not just enabling growth, it feels like it's leapfrogging traditional stages of development sometimes.
Leapfrogging. How
Well,
so?
think about UPI, the Unified Payments Interface.
Yeah.
It's more than just a payment system now. It's almost like a public good. It's brought millions into the formal economy, sparked entrepreneurship at a scale you just don't see everywhere.
Wow.
So yeah, we're seeing really strong growth startups, fintech, IT services. It's fueled by global outsourcing, sure, but also massive domestic digitalization. India is absolutely cementing itself as a global tech hub. That
Okay.
feels like the real game changer.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. What about manufacturing? We hear a lot about Make in India, these PLI schemes, the production linked incentive.
Right, incentives to boost local
Yeah,
production.
exactly. They're meant to give the sector a
Yeah.
boost. But are we seeing real diversification away from, say, relying heavily on Chinese imports? Or is that still more of a long-term goal given the, economic realities?
It's definitely still a work in progress. More long-term aspiration, maybe. I mean, those initiatives have given manufacturing a boost, no doubt. But the sector still faces headwinds from global trade tensions. And yes, that dependency on Chinese imports for many components, that's still a major factor. Balancing domestic ambitions with these global realities, it's a delicate dance, as you said. Takes time, takes serious investment.
Okay, so let's connect this to people's lives. What about jobs? How are the employment trends actually looking for the average Indian?
Well, the picture is a bit mixed. We have seen a slight marginal reduction in urban unemployment, so that's positive.
Okay.
But job creation in rural areas, that's still lagging. It remains a concern. And what's also really notable is this huge rise in gig work and informal jobs.
Yes, the gig economy
Yeah,
everywhere now.
it really is. But for India, it raises this critical question. Is this flexibility a sign of progress, or is maybe more a symptom of kind of underemployment in the traditional sectors? It's fundamentally reshaping the labor market, that's for sure.
Interesting point. Okay, looking ahead now. India is making quite a significant push towards a green economy. How important is this shift, especially for a country developing so rapidly?
Oh, it's hugely significant
Yeah,
and strategically very smart, I think. India's really ramped up investments in renewables, in electric vehicles, sustainable practices generally.
and the payoff.
Well, the projection is twofold. One, it should reduce that long-term dependency on imported energy, which is a huge economic and strategic plus. And two, it's expected to create entirely new industries, new job sectors. It shows real foresight.
Right. Okay, last piece of the puzzle then. Let's zoom out. How is India navigating the global economic stage? All the swirling influences out there.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. India has definitely benefited from that whole China plus one strategy.
Yeah.
Global companies looking to diversify supply chains away from China.
They've been a beneficiary there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not all smooth sailing. They've faced challenges too. Volatile global oil prices, obviously the conflicts in the Middle East create uncertainty, other
Yeah.
supply chain disruptions.
So it cuts both ways.
Exactly. What's really fascinating is India's position. It's sort of both benefiting from global shifts and vulnerable to global shocks. Pretty unique spot, really.
What a dynamic picture indeed. India's economy, it's clearly, like we said at the start, this blend of really rapid growth, but also facing these significant ongoing challenges, a real balancing act.
It truly is. And I think the key takeaway for you listening is that India's economic resilience, it's undeniable. But its path forward really hinges on navigating these internal pressures, especially that rural demand, job creation piece, and skillfully managing all those external forces, global trade, geopolitics.
So thinking about all these factors, we've touched on this incredible digital leapfrogging, the strategic green push, but alongside those stubborn rural issues and the global headwinds, it makes you wonder how might India's really unique path reshape its role on the world stage in the next few years? And maybe, what does that mean for the rest of us? Something to mull over.